It began with nothing more than a loading screen and a name hovering over a character that looked no different from 100 others. The sun sat high in a sky that never changed. The grass swayed as though it had its own life, and players zipped by on vehicles I had never seen before. Their farms were massive, overflowing with color and movement. Each plot pulsed with life. Machines buzzed, and plants sparkled, and upgrades flashed with every step they took, but none of that belonged to me. Not yet. He stepped forward, unsure of what to do or where to begin. There was no fancy tutorial waiting for me, no glowing arrows pointing the way, no friendly guide with a clipboard and a plan. Instead, I was met with silence and the soft hum of distant activity. Other players zoomed by with polished gear and flashy upgrades, leaving trails of dust and sparkles in their wake. Their gardens buzzed with life, their hands moved with confidence, their rows of crops lined up like soldiers in perfect formation. And here I stood on the edge of something I barely understood. Only a patch of land waited for me, a small forgotten space wedged between the towering farms of veterans. It looked like the kind of place someone else had skipped over, as if it were too modest, too insignificant, too slow to bother with. But to me, it was everything. It was the beginning of a story. I had yet to write a blank page in a game filled with color and competition. That quiet square of soil, that untouched dirt, that little island of potential would become the ground on which I tested every instinct, every decision, and every bit of patience. I walked toward it with slow, deliberate steps, feeling the weight of the game settle into my shoulders. The wind played with the leaves of distant trees. The sky remained a brilliant blue, unchanging, as though frozen in time, and I paused to take it all in. Around me, life bloomed at lightning speed. Seeds vanished into the ground and almost immediately came up ready for harvest. Sprinklers twirled, harvesting machines chattered, and upgrades blinked like lights on a holiday tree. The world felt alive with purpose and motion, and yet I had nothing but a handful of seeds and a tool that felt awkward in my grip. I stared at my field and felt a rush of questions swarm through my mind. How would I compete with all of this? How would I rise from nothing when everyone else was so many steps ahead? How would I find the rhythm that let them glide across their land with the grace of experience while I stumbled, just trying to line up a row? But even as doubt crept up my spine, I knew I had only one option. I had to try, and so I planted my first seed slowly, almost ceremoniously, pressing it into the dirt as if that one action could unlock the path ahead. I crouched low, watching the soil settle, as if hoping that by sheer force of will I could make it grow faster. I waited, heart pounding, as though the whole world was watching, even though I knew no one was. No fireworks went off, no badge appeared on screen, no system message praised my effort. It was just me and the field, and that one planted dream. In that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not chase the fastest player. I would not try to mimic someone else's method. I would learn my own path. I would plant with purpose. I would move with intention. I would study the land, the timing, the flow, and I would adapt. I would farm smarter, not harder, and I would do it differently if I had to. Instead of rushing ahead, I stepped back and watched the world unfold. Players ran through loops with practiced efficiency. I noticed how they moved, not randomly, but in carefully rehearsed routes, circling their plots with the precision of a dance. I studied how they harvested, and when they planted, what they ignored and what they focused on. I watched for patterns and clues, reading their actions like a map to a hidden treasure. Then I returned to my own plot and began to build my rhythm. I paced along the edge, planning each row in my mind, visualizing how I would walk, how I would plant, how I would harvest. I started small, focusing on just one side, creating a loop I could run smoothly again and again until it felt like second nature. I timed my movements with the sun, noticing when it felt right to plant and when it was better to wait. I began to understand that the secret was not in having more crops, but in having the right crops placed the right way, growing in sync with my steps. Every time I harvested, I made sure to plant immediately, so no space was wasted. Every trip I made across the plot had a reason, and every action I took led to the next. I found momentum not in speed, but in rhythm. I learned to work with what I had. I resisted the temptation to jump ahead. I ignored the flashing icons begging me to upgrade and focused instead on perfecting my loop. My steps became lighter, my actions quicker, my confidence growing with each harvest. I memorized my layout so well that I could close my eyes and still know where every crop was, where every space would be ready again, and how long it would take me to complete the next round. While others chased glittering upgrades, I built something stronger. I built understanding. I watched them sprint from one machine to another, often stopping mid-run to check something or fix something, while I moved in a quiet circle like a farmer who had been doing this their entire life, slow, steady, focused as the sky turned from day to night and the world bathed in soft blue. I kept going. My little plot started to feel like home. My rows neat and clean, my path smooth and practiced. I smiled without even realizing it, because I was no longer unsure. I was no longer standing on the outside looking in. I was farming, and I was doing it on my terms. Each seed I planted told a story of patience and planning. Each harvest was a step forward, earned not bought. My patch of dirt, Hasso, I planted the first seed, watching the ground shift. As life began its slow journey upward, I knelt beside that crop as if I could will it to grow faster, as if my determination could pull it through the soil faster than the game intended. I watched the sun pass overhead and the wind play across the surface of nearby farms, and in that moment I made a decision. I would not rush blindly. I would observe, I would learn, and then I would act. It was not about planting everything all at once. It was about understanding the rhythm of the land. I saw how players moved in loops, how they returned to the same spots again and again. I watched the timing of their harvests and the pattern of their layouts. I noticed who stood still and who never stopped walking. I listened to the sound of footsteps and the rustle of crops swaying in unison. I was studying the garden like a book with no words, and then I tested my own movements, walking a tight loop around my plot. I placed seeds with intention, spacing them so I could glide from one to the next without a single wasted step. I memorized the soil like it was part of me, counting my moves, measuring the time between plant and harvest. I was no longer just playing. I was farming with precision. The key was not speed, but efficiency. I realized that fast. Farming on day one was not about how much you planted, but how well you planted. Every second had to count. Every movement had to mean something. I carried only what I needed, moving light and quick, returning to my storage just before it filled, but never after. I treated my farm like a machine, and I was the operator, pulling every lever at the perfect time. I avoided distractions, no chasing upgrades too early, no wandering off to explore just yet. This was about setting the foundation, not the most exciting part of the game maybe, but absolutely the most important, because every fast farmer I saw now, every player flying through the fields in a blur, had once been standing where I was now. The difference was that some of them had spent while others had learned. I chose to learn. When night fell in the game and the fields glowed under the artificial stars, I kept going. I found that planting in rhythm with the game's cycles gave me better results. Timing my actions to the world around me made everything smoother. While others rushed and stumbled, I was finding flow, and that flow changed everything. I built routes from one corner to the other, always moving, always planting, always harvesting. I learned how to predict what would be ready when I was still halfway across the field. I learned how to balance my energy so that I never had to stop. I created momentum, and that momentum became my engine. I knew the soil, I knew the game. I had planted every seed with intention and harvested every crop with awareness. I had mapped every inch of my plot in my mind, and I could work it with my eyes closed. That was the power of playing smart. That was the strength of starting slow and building fast. And when the first player stopped beside me and asked how I was growing so quickly on day one, I just smiled, because the answer was not a secret. It was in every step I had taken, every loop I had walked, every quiet choice I had made while others chased flash. This is the fastest way to farm coins on day one, not by skipping ahead, not by imitating others, but by learning the land, moving with purpose, treating every second like it matters, because it does. Your farm is not just a place to plant, it is a reflection of how you play. And if you play with heart, with focus, with intention, then even your first day can feel like your 100th, and soon, without even realizing it, you will be the one flying across the fields, moving with rhythm and power, while the new players stop and wonder how you got there. And you will remember the plot of land that looked like nothing, the first seed that barely grew, the loop that became a dance. That is how you farm like a pro on day one. No Robux, no shortcuts, just you, your soil, and the will to grow.